All right, from the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, and well, not the low desert. I'm joined by three gentlemen here in from the tropical paradise of South Dakota in the middle of December. We are pitching ourselves as the premier South Dakota politics podcast that is based outside of South Dakota. So this feels somehow very appropriate. Um, so I'm joined this morning. Well, it's morning. No, no, it's morning their time too. But I'm joined this morning by Jack Hinrichs, somebody who listeners to this program will be very familiar with. Sam Markley and Travis Dahle. And Travis, you're in Sioux Falls, right?
Correct.
All right. And Sam, you said you're in Aberdeen, which we know is Toby Doden country.
It is, in fact, Toby Doden country, not too far away from his hometown of Groton. That's correct.
See, I'm learning, Jack. I'm learning my South Dakota geography, my South Dakota political geography.
You're going to know all 66 counties any day now. We're working on
You know, I'm gonna actually have a big. I'm gonna have to get one of those big touch boards where I'm gonna be behind me that I can point to at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then it'll be really exciting when you know which license plate number goes to which county. And so then you're driving around South Dakota and you can say, ah, that guy is from Coddington County. It's a really fun game you
You
can
know,
play.
oh, is that Jan from Coddington County? Is that
That is more or less how it goes. Yeah.
all right? We've invited Travis and Sam on to discuss the importance of high school debate and civil discourse in high schools. Here at the Center for American Institutions, one of our mission and one of our mandates is to encourage and foster civic discourse and civic dialogue on university campuses. And of course, students come into university having an experience in high schools with their own, having their own experiences, their own personal experiences. And we found here at the Center for American Institutions that many of our best students have quite a bit of experience in high school debate. And so I'm very fortunate to be joined by these gentlemen. And so, Sam, we'll start with you. Are you able to tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your experience with high school debate?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm currently finishing up my teaching degree down at the University of South Dakota. Prior to like kind of my history with South Dakota debate and debate in general, I went to Washington High School in Sioux Falls, where I was coached by Travis actually for two years or three. I can't remember exactly when he left. Three. There we go. Thanks for the help. And yeah, had a pretty good had a good run there. Did well at the state competition, did well at nationals, and then the new coach came around. We had some turnover with assistant coaches, and I kind of offered myself up like, hey, if you need someone to fill in for a few years to help out coaching, make sure the team is still competitive, I'm nearby, I can help out. And that's started about a 3 year now of me coaching, assistant coaching for Washington High School. And it's kind of turned into what I'm planning my career to be. I kind of switched from wanting to be a lawyer, took a few law classes, did mock trial, realized I'd really hate being a lawyer, and kind of made the transition to teaching, coaching. That's kind of the end game, is finding somewhere to coach and to teach and eventually be the head coach for a debate program somewhere.
Wonderful. Okay, Travis, we got a little bit about you there, but maybe you can explain a little bit more.
Yeah, so kind of like Sam, I started getting involved in coaching when I was in college. Actually in Aberdeen when I was at Northern State University and enjoyed that. And then bounced around a little bit, different places depending on where I was living. Coached at Dual High School for a while in Clear Lake. Coached at Beersford for a year, and then got hired at Washington in the fall of 2004. And from there, was the head coach for a year while the head coach was on sabbatical at the time. Who actually is still around and actually both coached Jack and Sam, Eric Euchre. And but he came back as head coach, so I was the assistant for a few years, and then he stepped down as the head coach, and I took over as the full-time head coach in 2009. And I was there until the spring of 2021 when the new high school opened up, and uh, I always worry about debate programs, and one thing I'm sure we'll talk about is just the lack of coaching. Just there's just not a lot of us out there, and so I'd been really worried about Jefferson and were they going to get a new program, and I wanted them to have a good one, and my wife finally goes, well, why don't you start the program? And I was like, I don't know, I like Washington, and I really enjoyed it there. But the more I thought about it, I knew my assistant was going to get her teaching license, and the other two people that help out, Eric Euchre and Eric Hansen, were going to stick around. So I knew I was going to leave it in good hands, especially Sam as a senior, Jack as a junior. It's tough to leave good kids like that, but decided it was a kind of a good time, perfect time to try it out. So, and I've been over at Sioux Falls Jefferson since. So, still the head coach there, really enjoying it, and just love the activity.
Right on. Well, I got to tell you, if for whatever reason you're looking for a change in career, there's a lot of college football coaches that could use you as their PR guy because your explanation for switching schools is considerably more authentic and genuine and believable than theirs.
Yeah, it bounces around a little bit. I did go to high school with Kalen DeBoer from Alabama, so
Oh, okay.
you know, it's like, hey, this is the most famous person probably now from Millbank. So
Well, the boar at this point, I'm pretty sure, as somebody who spent a lot of time in the South knows that the boar at this point is probably trying to keep his South Dakota roots on the down low. He doesn't want the Alabama boosters to know about that. Oh, that's great. All right. So, yeah, let's start just a little bit about what is high school debate. I mean, I think a lot of people now go to high school and maybe don't even encounter the opportunity. Maybe they've heard of high school debate, but they might not know anything about it. And they certainly probably have very limited experience with it. Travis, given that you have experience going back 25 years here, are you able to tell us a little bit about what high school debate is and what's just involved with it?
yeah, so it's changed, obviously changed over the years, which I know we'll get to, but essentially it comes down to it's essentially a competitive research and argumentation activity. And so there's a national organization called the National Speech and Debate Association that kind of runs a lot of the kind of sets up the structures and times and even the topics, along with the National Federation of High Schools, and so they work together to create kind of a different topics. And then there's three different main types of debate. There's policy debate, which is kind of the oldest style of debate. It's been around for a long time, sometimes called cross-examination debate. And, that's kind of died down a little bit. But then there's a couple other styles that have grown a lot. Lincoln Douglas debate, which both Jack and Sam mostly did. And then public forum debate, which is intended to have more be able to have like just people that have no debate background be able to go in and watch a debate. And of course that's changed over the years, but for the most part, there's essentially on the debate side those three different activities. And so students come in, they learn a topic, and there's very set structures for time, like this person always speaks first, this person speaks second, this is a cross examination time, and it varies with each of the different events. But essentially, they have a topic. They have to research both sides of the topic because they have to argue for and against it. And so, switch side debate is kind of something that they have to learn opposing viewpoints, which can be tough sometimes for teenagers that are very hard nosed when it comes to their opinions sometimes. And it's like, no, there's a reason other people support the other side, and so it's getting them exposed to that research. And then basically once we've done some research, built cases and arguments together, then you go to a competition, and it's different because it's no longer where it's just one team going against from let's say one team from Sioux Falls Jefferson going against one team from Sioux Falls Washington, where you have a bunch of judges and an audience in the auditorium speaking. That's not how it works. The way I equate it is almost like a track meet where there's a bunch of different events happening all at once, and there's multiple people competing against others in all these different events. And what happens in the classrooms is you have essentially like a team from Washington versus Jefferson with a judge from Roosevelt or Aberdeen or Brookings. And then in another room, it's two other teams with a different judge. And another room is two other teams. So there's multiple rounds that happen to where you go down to like a, semifinal round or quarterfinal round and then go from there. So it's a lot of research and work on the front end, and then competition against multiple different teams at a competition to decide who kind of wins the tournament.
Okay, so going into a tournament, you have some idea of what the topics are that are going to be up for debate, correct?
Yeah, so typically in policy debate, you actually find out the topic that you're going to debate all year in March. So like this late in February or March, they'll come out with a topic for next year. So there'll be students that will actually go to camps and research for like 6 weeks, just tons of research on the topic, and they develop it. Now they don't know necessarily what their opponents are going to run and the arguments that they're going to make, but at least they know what the topic is. And in public forum and LD, we found out our topic a month beforehand. So like for the November and December topics, we found out that topic October 1st. And so basically we spent the whole month of October researching to try and get ready to go to build up arguments to figure out, okay, what are people going to run? How are they going to run it? And a lot of times you kind of see a lot of the same arguments once you get going, because it's like the best evidence kind of rises to the top and everybody wants to use the best evidence. So then it just becomes who can argue it better.
Sure. And Sam, maybe I am going to pivot to you here. How are these things scored by judges?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I normally like tell my students a lot of times it is difficult to score debates because it's not necessarily objective, right? It's not like basketball where they make a 2-pointer or a 3-pointer, you know for sure, okay, you got 2 points or 3 points now on the board, right? It is very subjective to who the judge is in the back of your round, what we think might appeal to them, how much experience they have, the type of like background knowledge they might have. So a lot of times we have conversations about like 5 minutes before a round starts about like, hey, here's your judge, here's how much experience they have on this topic, so they kind of have an idea going in, like what exactly they should do when it comes to judge appeal, right? And I think that's one of the things that the activity does a really good job of training kids for is just appealing to people with different backgrounds or different content knowledge, and no matter like who that person is in back of the round, trying to construct your case or make the argument in a way that appeals to that person the most, right? Like another thing like I always explain to them too is you're not trying to convince your opponent that you're right, you're trying to convince your judge that you're right. And so when it comes to scoring, some judges tend to care a lot more about speaking skills and how like pretty you present your argument. And a lot of other judges are the complete opposite way, where really they don't care if you're sitting or standing when you're giving your speech, if you're wearing a hoodie with your hood up, or if you're in a tuxedo. Just like if you're presenting logical arguments and the arguments you're making make sense, that's what they're gonna vote on. So it's a wide spectrum between like presentation skills and like the actual concrete logical argumentation.
Interesting. I also think that, I mean, something that hadn't occurred to me until I was listening to you guys explain it. But I think that also gives students an experience with uncertainty, which is
Oh yeah.
something that is very difficult to teach. And I think a lot of students grow into adulthood. Their usual experience in high schools is everything's fairly certain. There's a lot of black and white. And so you're giving people uncertainty with assessment. Sorry, uncertainty with assessment is a hard phrase for a guy with a little bit of a lisp to say. So I apologize for that. To our listeners too. Um, but anyway, that Jack, is there anything you'd like to build on what they've said, given your
Yeah,
experience with high
actually,
school debate?
both Sam and Dahle know what they're talking about to a greater degree.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
relieved to hear you say that.
it's always good when you invite guests who are more qualified. But what I really want to emphasize about the points that they've made is that in high school debates specifically, you have to understand and empathize with your opponent's argument, because in order to attack that argument, in order to rebut that argument, you can't just take sort of a straw man version of it and then attack that. In order to attack an argument, you have to understand the logical and intellectual underpinnings of that argument and go after those. And it's so tough to teach many people how to empathize with opposing arguments. But in high school debate, you have to do that to be successful. And that, I think, is one of the great values of high school debate, is it naturally cultivates civil discourse because it is unique in teaching individuals who are passionate about policy or who are passionate about politics how to respect and empathize with the arguments that people are making against them.
Well, I have to say, there's a lot of academics I wish you could give this training to.
Yes.
As an academic, I mean, I'd like to see some academics be forced to cultivate empathy and to build arguments for the other side that are not entirely straw men. I'm guilty of it myself, so I don't want to not casting aspersions on others. But
Yeah.
okay, so Travis, you said, we did mention that debate has changed quite a bit over the last 25 years. How, from your perspective, how has it changed?
A couple of different ways. I think first, just the litany of evidence. When I was in high school, research was, we had these green like index books that were in the library that categorized topics, and then it would list which magazines had something to do with that topic. So let's say, one of our topics was, and it's kind of interesting is that the topics that we debated still have not been fixed. Like healthcare was a topic one year, immigration was a topic, environmental policy was a topic. So it's like, yeah. But, let's say I'm researching healthcare and I want to find out like different healthcare policies out there that have been reported on in magazines or newspapers. I would have to go to this green index book and flip through it and find, did my library have that magazine also? So I'd find one and be like, okay, our magazine or our library has this magazine. These are the pages. Then you'd have to go find that magazine, find the articles, read the article to try and find, did this argument make sense?
So what when you're referring to magazines, sorry, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you're referring to magazines, you mean, like, opinion magazines, like, uh, a national interest, something like that, or
No, I'm talking like Time, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report. Um,
okay.
the Christian Science Monitor was always a favorite of ours for extemporaneous speaking. But yeah, stuff like that. But I mean, I think those were kind of the big ones, at least at the time. Those are the mid '90s.
Right.
Um, but uh, but now it's like if I want to research healthcare, it's like I can just go to Google. I can go to, the various databases that our school has access to, and I can search up that information and it's boom, it's right there. I can put in other keywords and search it. The efficiency of finding the evidence is so much quicker, but it's also, I think, you have it's one of those where it's information overload too. I think the depth of knowledge that I would have on a topic is when you didn't have access to Google was probably in some ways better because you had to read books like you went to journals, you went to academic papers and you had to read through them and understand the context of it. Whereas now I can just search, let's say somebody runs an argument and I'm like, I can search for it in a matter of minutes and find an article. It might not be very good, but I'll have something and able to respond to that. So, that's one way debates really changed a lot is just the access to information. Now, in some ways that's been good because, I grew up in a small town where I didn't have access to a law library. We weren't making trips to a state university to look at their information compared to, schools, bigger schools that they would take trips to the University of Minnesota's law school and be able to do a bunch of research, right? So in some ways it has really balanced out as far as like competitiveness wise, which is nice. And I think another thing too, speed has definitely increased in debate. and some other types of arguments. So, when in over the last 30 years, you've seen debate really go from, I mean, it was still fast, but it wasn't, I don't know if you've ever seen a debate round, but debaters talk faster, a lot faster than I'm talking right now, and people say I talk fast. But the the debates were very much on the policy of the topic, and you were going fast, but it wasn't incomprehensible. Where now there are some debates where you'll see a debate, and 90% of the people are like, what is that? That is just garbage, because they're talking so fast and so rapidly, because you have a short amount of time. You only have a certain amount of time. You have to get in these arguments. And so, that's been one of the things that's changed a little bit. So yeah, those are kind of a couple of big ones.
Interesting. Okay. Um, Sam, you're coming into coach debate, now that, I mean, your experience as a debater was in the era of Google and keyword searches and general, and, I would imagine full access to university digital collections and whatnot. Um, how do you see it changing over the last 4 or 5 years, maybe on a more micro level?
Yeah, I'd say like on a micro level, definitely like I grew up in the era of being just able to Google stuff, or like JSTOR is always a favorite of mine, especially after I took a dual credit class and had a university email account. I was able to get onto those journals and find some better information. It was wonderful. I think like the biggest thing I'm noticing that's been changing recently has got to be like artificial intelligence. Like not only is it like people using it to research, but also people using it to just fully construct their speech. Like, I remember I sat in a round with that had, like, a judge panel on it, so it was me and then the head coach of Washington at the time, Angelica Mercado Ford, and we saw, like, a debater give up and give, like, a rebuttal speech, and it was, like, fully AI generated, and we finished, like, with that round, wrote our ballot, and we kinda walked out of the round and looked at each other, and it's like, What just happened?" It was really weird to experience because especially, like, when I worked at USD, I had time in, like, the writing center as a consultant, so I got very good at spotting, like, AI generated text, and it is just really weird to see that pop up in the debate round, but I also think so, like, there's part of it, like, people using it to construct their speeches, but also people utilizing it to rely on research, right? Like, very famously, AI is a bit questionable when it comes to the sources they pull from. I remember a pretty famous story from maybe 2 years ago where a lawyer used AI to find some, like, case history, of, like, precedent when they were writing a brief, and the AI just spit out fake cases, and the lawyer put that in their brief and cited those fake cases, and they nearly got disbarred for it if they didn't. So I think that's the main thing is AI using it to construct speeches, using it for research. One thing I've heard floating around that is, like, also kinda terrifying to me is the concept of, like Substack and Medium are things out there, like, people could just publish whatever, like, opinion article or blog they want to. I have heard people talking about the idea of just straight up having AI construct an argument that they want to use in a case, and then publishing that under a pseudonym on Substack or Medium, and then just using that as a source to cite with. And, the I think, like, there's a decline due to AI of kind of those critical thinking skills, those research skills, and those argumentative skills as pretty much the core of debate. They definitely, like, certainly has some benefits to it, like, JSTOR, for one, I know, is incorporating, some, like, AI research skills. When you, like, search up a journal and find an article, it'll, like, use some artificial intelligence to pull other articles that are related to it. So it can certainly fast track the process that way, but I think there's an increasing likelihood of, like any other thing in school, also in an academic activity in school, is becoming a bit of a crutch and less of a tool. And as someone who, again, will like print out the journal articles and take a highlighter to them and annotate them, that's something that becomes a bit scary for me, at least. I'm not necessarily sure what the like end road of that is going to be.
Interesting. Um, Given this new environment with AI, is there a form of debate? You mentioned that there's 3 forms: policy, Lincoln Douglas, and then public forum. Is there one type that is more susceptible to abuse through AI than others?
I wouldn't necessarily I'm not necessarily certain that, like, any of them are more subject to abuse than others because the speeches are pretty much delivered the same way, like, someone gets up there with their computer or their flow paper, like, where they've taken notes and they deliver their rebuttal. I think, like, there are some tools, thanks to technology, that are out there that kind of benefit evidence ethics. Like, I think in the past, this was before my time, but, evidence would be exchanged via, like, a flash drive, and so you would have, like, your case or, like, the evidence you'd be reading, and you'd have it on a flash drive, and you'd give it to your opponent, they put it in their computer so they can see the evidence you're using. Like, a lot of times, the way evidence is constructed in debate, you have the full citation at the top, and then it's literally like a copy paste text of, like, the evidence, and you highlight the parts you're reading. Like, you're everything you're reading for evidence, it's like verbatim, you're reading it. And so when people can actually see, like, here's the citation, here's the link I can click on and follow that and see, like, where you're pulling this from, what the author's credentials are, I think that's very beneficial. That's more of a common thing in policy debate now, not necessarily with a flash drive, but there's a lot of websites or systems on there where you can literally just upload a PDF or a Word doc of the evidence you're using with the full citation, like the author, date, title, the journal it's from, the link you can click on and follow to. And that's more of a thing in policy that kind of helps with that fact checking. Policy also certainly is a lot more prep time to give debaters a bit more time to work through that and take a look at those types of things. Whereas, like, I think policy it's 8 minutes, and public forum and Lincoln Douglas it's 4 minutes. But I think, like, if that became more of a common thing in Lincoln Douglas, I'm not sure how public forum would do with that, but in LD, of using those websites where we can see each other's cases and we can see the evidence we're pulling from and the author's credentials to double check that, at least, like, maybe if you don't catch it in the moment and that round or at that tournament, certainly it makes the out of tournament prep easier on, like, double checking those things and catching those things and nipping them in the bud. So that'd be my thing, is just, like, kind of encouraging more evidence ethics and, like, evidence disclosure to double check that stuff.
Sure. Travis?
Yeah, I mean, Sam made a lot of the points there about evidence, and that's where I think it helps prevent some kids from, I guess, really abusing AI because they will get called out by other debaters in the debate rounds. And then, if you get a reputation for always, cheating on your evidence, like it spreads, especially, in any circuit. The South Dakota circuit's pretty small. I mean, we all know each other. But so does Nebraska. Like everybody in Nebraska knows each other. Everybody in Iowa knows each other. Even on national circuit, because there's a kind of a circuit that travels nationwide at a lot of some of the really big tournaments. Well, the same schools are always there, and so it's one of those where you don't want to. And I always tell students that it's like the minute you get that reputation, it is impossible to overcome that. I mean,
Mhm.
so just don't even risk it. And so, and Sam talked a little bit about the evidence sharing. It is more common in national circuit and in some other uh, circuits rather than South Dakota. Um, but I do see, and kids will ask, like, "That's an interesting piece of evidence. Can I see that?" And then they'll have a chance to look at the evidence, and then even if they can't really examine it in depth during that round, they come back on Monday. We're like, "Okay, what work do we have to do?" And they're like, "Okay, we got to find this article because it is almost too good to be true. So let's try and find it." And so and then you'd find that article and cut it down. But that's that with I think some students are using it, unfortunately, to try and think of like, okay, how do I respond to this? Because part of debate is having to think on your feet and having to respond to arguments with a very limited amount of time. And but it's competitive. So kids are like, okay, I want to win this. And so, but I think it's one of those where the kids that use it as a crutch, they're not going to be nearly as good. And they're going to lose those debates. So I think it's one of those where I mean, I'm a little concerned about it, but I'm not, but at the same point, I know the same kids that have been putting in the work for decades over the years are the ones that typically rise to the top. And,
Right.
and that's not going to change.
Right. And the people who cheat like Jack did will always cheat.
This is true.
Uh,
I was well known for having pretty shoddy integrity on the South Dakota debate circuit. I was disliked. I was warned against.
Yeah. It's okay. That reputation has followed you to Arizona.
Yeah. Well, see what I did, and I should mention this because Sam's here, where I didn't use AI to do research because I didn't do research. I used Sam's research. And I went through 4 years of debate without ever once cutting. So in your rebuttal speeches, you have what's known as rebuttal evidence. And so that's evidence that's not specifically in the case that you're presenting at the beginning of the round, but you have in a file in case it's applicable to the case that the other person is running. And generally speaking, a good debater has a very robust file of rebuttal evidence because they want something that's applicable to anybody that they're debating against. I, on the other hand, never had any rebuttal evidence because I thought that I was just didn't need it, and so every so often I would encounter a situation where my laziness was actually an impediment, and so then I would go to Sam and I'd say, "Hey Sam, do you have a piece of evidence I could use in this situation?" And then Sam would sigh, and he would glare at me, and then he would give me the piece of evidence that I needed to go win that round. So I really appreciate Sam. I want to thank you again for saving my butt on all of those various and assorted occasions.
I'm beginning to see, Jack. I'm increasingly learning why you're going to be such a great lawyer. Uh,
Well, I won't be a great lawyer because Sam won't be working.
well, no, you'll have to find a new Sam, but
I'll have to
you
find.
can do. Yeah, you can do that.
Sam's out educating children and changing the world and brightening lives.
And you chase and you, but he could be chasing ambulances with you.
Mhm. Yeah, his face isn't gonna be on the billboard with me, and that's gonna be really depressing, I imagine, when he's 50 and it's lived that, unsatisfying life.
Right. All right. So let me ask you guys. I'll start with you, Sam, and then we'll move over to Travis. Have you seen a difference in the type of students who are attracted to debate in high school, or in the profile of students, even in like I mean, because Sam, I know you. On the one hand, it seems a little bit like your experience as a coach is limited, but the last there's anybody doing anything the last 4 years has lived 1,000 lifetimes doing it. So, what is there anything that you've seen maybe coming out of COVID particularly that has changed?
So I think coming out of COVID is a great point to make. Yeah, I would definitely say I haven't noticed that much. I am sure Dolly can give a bit more insight onto it. I will say, like, generally there's certain, like, I guess, archetypes that kind of go into debate. There are those like want to do debate because they know it's their thing. They like maybe they argue with their parents a lot, right? And so they know like, hey, they have experience in this. They like arguing or they pay attention to politics already. And so they know they'll be good at this. They want to be involved in something. This is their thing. They want to do it. There's certainly like others who join it because they want a place for them and maybe some of their friends are involved in it. So they view it as an opportunity to like hang out with their friends and compete in an activity. And certainly there's nothing wrong with that either. I think like generally a lot of people join to speech and debate for their own reasons. Some of it they just kind of do need an outlet to get their opinions out there and like to be seen. Others, it is competitive. There are college scholarships certainly involved with it, and so they view it as definitely a resume builder, I'd say for sure. And there are those others who either they just want a place after school and don't want to go back home, or they have some friends involved in the activity and they rope them into it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those people can also certainly become very competitive as well. But when it comes to differences and changes, I it's difficult for me to necessarily put my thumb on. I think certainly, especially for like competing at Washington and working at Washington, it's one of the most like diverse high schools in South Dakota, which is certainly a benefit of going there and also working there, of just seeing all the different groups and all the different people who join the activity and all the different reasons they do and the different perspectives they bring to it. So I think Dolly could maybe put a bit more emphasis on it. But for me, generally, I haven't noticed much of a difference. I've noticed like there's kind of these generally like groups of people that have some certain reasons that they do it, and I haven't seen those archetypes, I guess, change that much.
Yeah, I think Sam's right that there's definitely certain people that at least, want to try debate, right? Like, so we actually in Sioux Falls offer a debate one class where the kids can come in and learn about debate. They learn about the different speech events that we also do besides debate, and it counts as a speech credit. And so there you get an interesting mix of students that think debate is just, oh, we get to argue about, is water wet? Is hot dog a sandwich? And they just think that's what they get to do. And I'm like, surprise, you get to do a lot of research here. And they're like, what? Why am I in this class? And so it's kind of interesting because Sam Mark, mentioned about how sometimes kids are like, well, I argue with my parents all the time. And it's like, yeah, that's not necessarily like a good thing. But I mean, some of those kids are in there. But I think he's also right that it just kind of depends on why kids get involved. You know, I stumbled into debate because it got me out of an English class in high school. And I didn't like English, and now I'm teaching English, but that's another story. But when I took the class, I had no idea what debate was. I just knew I was getting out of a different class. Yeah. And so my best friend was in the class. We started debating together and I had a blast. And it was a lot of fun and just kind of stuck around. And a lot of the kids I've coached over the years, I mean, they're super introverted kids that love the research and love the intellectual part of it, and the arguing seems less intimidating than getting up and giving a speech, because you're not getting up in front of a group of people giving a speech. You're getting up and you are in a competitive atmosphere against another team, so it gives them a little bit more comfort. I don't know why, because they still have to get up and talk, but for whatever reason that gives them a little bit more confidence, and they feel, I think, a lot of those introverts, and I think Sam probably is more of an introvert than Jack, right? Like Jack's very extroverted, Sam is very introverted, but you know, that research component just gives you that confidence with that. Then you have various competitive people. I mean, that aren't very athletic, right? You know, again, I love basketball, but I'm 5'8" and slow and can't really shoot that well. So basketball was not going to be my thing. Well, it's like, okay, what am I going to do during the winter months now? Well, I was involved in debate, really liked it. And it's like, you know what? I can be competitive here. And so, there's some kids that kind of find that competitiveness, that really enjoy it. And part of it is too, like Sam said, it's a community for a lot of kids. Like I always tell students, if you kind of like this activity, go and recruit your friends. Get as many of them as involved, because it's part of that community, and you just kind of become really tight with, because they spend so much time together. Um, and over the years, I don't think it's really changed much. I mean, it's the same. The years I was coaching at Dahle High School, I mean, it was a mix of, the quiet kids and the loud kids and just some competitiveness. And Washington, I mean, it's over the years that I was there, I mean, yeah, it's just kind of it's weird. um Part of it is, and I think Sam would probably attest to this, is it really does also depend on your coaches. I mean, some kids are going to love debate regardless of who is there, but the teams will vary based on who the coach is. I mean, I think Washington changed quite a bit when I left, because the person who took over was a lot different personality wise than I was, and she got a lot more diversity of kids there, because that's the groups that she was involved with, and so it really does kind of depend, I think, on the coaches as well. So, because and you think, well, that's unfortunate because it should be something that any kid can find, but partly is if you don't enjoy it as a freshman, like because either the coach is bad or just the vibe of the group is not great or just doesn't fit you, then it doesn't fit you. And so so it is kind of weird. It's partly, going back to college football, right? It's recruitment. I always tell students my job as the head coach, mostly in teaching the class, is to get the kids interested in the activity and to stick around. And then I'll let my assistant coaches, help out and make them even better. So yeah, but it just kind of varies on who really enjoys it.
For sure. And I mean, doesn't matter if it's debate, I suspect, or baseball. I mean, you join a team for the first time and you hate your teammates, or you don't, or you got a lousy coach, and I mean, you're going to hate baseball, right? And
Mhm.
even if you loved it, and vice versa, you might be somebody who isn't particularly into it or whatever, but you've got great teammates and you got a great coach, and all of a sudden you're rabid about it. So it's I just that. But it sounds like it's this really important community. It's clearly been an important community for you gentlemen, and is an important community for many others that I've spoken to. I didn't grow up in debate. Cards on the table. So I'm been really, really interested learning more about this. Travis, earlier you alluded to the fact that there've been that maybe there aren't as many debate programs at high
Yep.
schools as there used to be. Um, can you go a little bit more into detail there?
Yeah. So the problem with debate is that it is not a spectator sport. It's not it's not going to draw a crowd. It's not going to draw, attendance numbers. And so the people that are running schools, a lot of them have no idea what debate is, right? And there's no support for it. And so it's kind of tough to when you're looking at budgets, debate is an expensive activity. And because we're paying entry fees, we're paying for our judges, we're paying for the travel, we're paying for the evidence, because you need access to these resources. It's and there's no money coming in, and it's maybe anywhere from 4 to 20 students involved, depending on your team. And it's like, okay, why are we paying for all of this? And it's just the kids that I'm teaching. There's very few that ever go into coaching, and so when you talk about like, replacing coaches, when unfortunately when a coach leaves, a lot of times that program will die, and it just won't come back because there's just not that support.
Mhm.
My high school, my high school coach taught there for like 35 years, I think. I'm the only high school debate coach to come out of his program. And he was a tremendous coach. He had tons, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of kids. Uh, you know, Sam's going to be one of my students that's going into education. And I got another one who's already going into education with Duare. And it's like, that's really cool. Now, how long are they going to be around? Who knows, but I think part of it is it's twofold. There's not enough coaches to keep programs going, and there's not enough money because the support is kind of hard to drum up when you have principals that maybe like yourself, right, that didn't come from a debate school, they didn't have debate, they don't like, why would I, like, what benefit is this gaining the school? And that's something that we try to promote is the when you talk about just the improvement of academic scores, of just the accolades that the school itself can get because of a debate program, that's a good selling point. We're lucky in Sioux Falls. We've had really good support. Our current superintendent, his son was a policy debater for Washington High School, did really well, and he loves the activity. And our assistant superintendent was the principal at Washington for a few years and at Jefferson. And so he's seen the impact that debate has. And so like we're lucky here, but at the same point, we already mentioned the town of Groton High School. That had a great program for a long time. Well, their coach stepped down and that program has ceased to exist.
Mhm.
And so,
And I
same thing at
suspect
Dual.
and sadly, I suspect most people don't even know that it was there.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it was a smaller program, so the kids that went through it knew it, but I mean, now that it's gone, I don't know if anybody at that high school anymore, that any new people anyway would even know it's around.
There's a weird
And
trophy.
that's just
There's a weird trophy in a trophy case
yeah,
somewhere that everyone's, "What's that?"
yep,
Right?
yep.
Uh,
And so it is tough because I mean, you have a lot of the coaches that probably started in the 70s. They've all retired now. And a lot of those programs have gone away. Dual High School, where I coached at, that doesn't have a program anymore. Beersford, their old coach from the 80s and 90s, who's been retired for like 15 years, she's still coaching there.
right.
And so it's one of those where it's hard to find those coaches because it can be a long season and we compete on the weekends. So you're telling a teacher, hey, not only do all this teaching, but then on your free Saturday, I want you to go and deal with a bunch of kids, which again, I love, and I think it's been worthwhile, but a lot of people look at that and go, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Well, I mean, it takes time away from family. It takes time away from important stuff, right? So I get it.
Yep.
And they're not getting paid more.
No,
So,
it's very little.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's sort of to some degree, if you're a budget consultant, it sort of appears like low hanging fruit, the sort
Yep.
of thing that could easily, and yet, like so many of the things that appear to be low hanging fruit, they're they may be kind of they're actually really important. They may not be load bearing, but they're very important. I'm mixing the
Mhm.
metaphors here because that's what I do, and as the host, I get the privilege of getting to mix my metaphors. Um, but okay. About how have you found? We've talked a little bit about the changes in students having access to different tools with which to gather evidence over the years. Have you found? I mean, I think there's this this general belief among most people that students have gotten more opinionated in high schools. And if maybe not more opinionated, maybe less willing to hear out the other side than they were before in earlier generations. Do you find that to be the case?
I don't I don't really think so. I mean, I just think, I mean, in some ways, yes, because I think also the students have been exposed to more information, right? Like when I was in high school, you had the newspapers, which, covered a lot of great stuff, but like how many high schoolers were reading the newspaper? Like not too many. And we had like, I can't even remember the name of the news program, but it was like a 15-minute news program we watched in homeroom. But that was it. Like cable news didn't exist. You didn't really have, I mean, CNN was barely getting going. You didn't have the you didn't I mean, social media alone, I think we could talk about how that's really shifted
Yeah.
the way students, like, engage and talk about topics to where that has turned it, I think, a lot more black and white. Whereas I think in the debate world, when kids come in, like, they might have an opinion on something, but then they're researching, and at least they're looking at it from the perspective of, "Okay, if I had to argue this, what are the best arguments? And then how can I then argue against it as well?" So I think it's not necessarily, I think, the access to research that's caused, like, the perception anyway, that students are a lot more opinionated. I think it's just, first of all, the access to information, just the constant stream that so many students get nowadays. And with social media where there's no context, right? I mean, so much of communication is about, the tone of your voice and your body language, where none of that happens in online discourse. It is just, it is very much black and white. I am right, you are wrong, here's why you're wrong. And I think that's where that has bled over a little bit into some students. But any kid that takes the debate classes or that is involved in debate, they get exposed to so much more, and I think that helps them broaden their perspectives.
It kind of beats it out of them a little bit. Yeah, interesting. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there are people, and maybe Sam, building on your point earlier when you said, one of the archetypes of people who come into debate are people who like arguing with their parents a lot. Well, now, I mean, some of that's probably people who like arguing on social media a lot, right? And there's a very different, it's very different to construct a formal argument in the way that you do in debate versus dunking on somebody in 100 characters on social media. So,
I I remember Dahle. I don't know if you still have this poster on your wall in your classroom. But the first time I walked into his class when he was teaching my debate one class, my freshman year of high school, they had a poster that said, um, anybody who thinks that the activity of debate is worthless has never read a social media comment section. Um, and the activity of debate has made me so much more of a nuanced thinker. And so I just to build on those points, absolutely. With the advent of social media, high school debate, the nuance that it provides is in my opinion, more essential than ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can just speaking from seeing students, at the university level. Most of the students that I encounter are accustomed to argumentation on social media, right? And debate on social media. The few that are not, the few that are that rise above that almost immediately, right? And you can sense it right away, are those who've had experience in debate or something like that. If maybe not that
Mm.
specifically, but something like that, a law club or something like that. Again, not that we want to say nice things about lawyers here because we've already established that we're not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
This is a civilized space after all,
Mhm.
right?
There's a reason that we didn't invite moot court representatives to
Right.
this podcast.
Uh, um, but I mean, I've definitely noticed that, Jack being a perfect example of it, but certainly others as well that we have, that those who had experience in high school debate. One of our programs at the Center for American Institutions are probably our foundations class called Foundations of Democracy. Our students all participate in a debate. It's not as formal as it's a formal debate, but it's an informal formal debate, classroom style, right? But one of the things that they have to do is the day they are debating the topic, they have to submit a paper arguing the other side of the topic, right? And not only does that usually make the debate better, but it also hopefully forces the students to have um, you know, forced to sympathize with the other side if they don't already sympathize with the other side and are arguing the one they don't already agree with. So I think that's just a really important, just in building those intellectual skills. And I think it makes you a better. I mean, personally, I think it makes you a better citizen if you can do that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right, I'll get off my
It-
soapbox.
well, and I mean, every time I watch the news or I go on the Google News website on my computer, I see a think piece from a politician or from a professor somewhere talking about the dangers of polarization and the dangers of a culture of um, animosity we have in this country politically. And every time I see one of those think pieces, I say that the antidote is high school debate, and the antidote is programs like the Foundations of Democracy course that teach kids at their foundational intellectual years how to sympathize with opposing arguments. It's something that it's a soapbox that I also get on quite frequently. Not that I get on soapboxes, as Dolly and Sam can attest. Um, but
Listeners to this podcast can attest.
as listeners, I'm not an opinionated person. And so when you look at these seemingly existential problems confronting this country, polarization, animosity, the genuine hatred that many people have for members of the other political party, it's odd to think that the answer or the solution could be something as simple as high school debate, that the answer could be, 15-year-olds getting on a bus and going to a high school across town, um, to talk for 45 minutes, about, nuclear weapons or environmental rewilding or whatever the topic has to be, but genuinely, that I think is the solution.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask one last question here because I don't want to keep you any longer than I have to. But Sam, what is the most divisive topic you've ever had to deal with in high school debate that you've seen? And maybe it was unexpectedly divisive.
Ooh, that is a great one. Let me think. I need to think about it for a second. The first one I immediately go to, I didn't get to debate many rounds on it, but when I took the debate one class, I originally was a policy debater, and I believe that topic that year for policy debate was about like expanding like immigration control, which feels like very pressing today even. But I feel like I imagine that was divisive to have to coach back then. I feel like if that one had to come around today, it'd be even more so. So I had to debate that one a little bit. I think absent that, there was one a few years ago that was about open borders and if like a just government requires open borders. That one, I know was a bit not I wouldn't say spicy, but I know that one was a bit uncomfortable or more like uncomfortable conversations that had to be had kind of on the same lines like immigration and how we go about having that conversation. So I'd say probably that one.
Mhm. Travis?
You know, it is kind of interesting. Sam mentions the immigration one because I mean, I debated that in high school, and the conversations around it today versus 30 years ago are wild. Um, Interestingly, public forum used to be very current events based. Uh, there was a topic once, and I still can't believe this is a topic about the NBA dress code.
Mm.
And if you remember that back in the mid 2000s, where David Stern and
Stern, yeah.
whoever implemented a dress code.
Yeah, it was
Stern, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And of course, it was kind of interesting because, like, some people were like, well, yeah, why not? It was like, no, and then it was like, no, there's a racial component here. That's why they're doing it. Because, and so it was interesting conversations on that one. But I think some, other tough ones, talking about everything from, like policies with Mexico. And so there's a lot of questions about trafficking of children and women. And so that got, some pretty heated discussions too. But really, I think most people, the topics do a pretty good job typically of finding a good balance of, because you don't just want to be one-sided
Sure.
one way or the other. I know for a little while they had a topic called, it was civil disobedience in, like, is a justified response to political oppression. And so it was one of those where, okay, can people protest? And I think, again, it wasn't a topic until post George Floyd, where then it was like, okay, now we're talking about police brutality and our protests, ish. And so then it kind of became more divisive. But again, I think that's because of our political nature in America, not because students couldn't argue both sides.
Mhm.
I'm kind of
Well, I
nervous
mean-
about February.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say, I am a little nervous about February coming up because my guess is we're going to be debating about whether or not we should overturn Heller v. Washington District of Columbia.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about gun rights in the great state of South Dakota. So
Yeah.
we'll see how that goes.
So you do know that's the topic in February?
It's a potential topic. It comes out in 3 days.
Okay. Okay. So what's the policy debate one this year?
That's an excellent question. I should know this one. Let me look it up real quick.
I also should
Um,
considering I judged
yeah.
Rouse on it.
Yeah, you did judge the final round of policy debate at the Brookings Ball tournament about a week and a half ago, Sam.
That's
Yeah.
yes.
That was like Christmas ago. So
It's a
Exactly.
while ago.
That's true.
Oh, it's interesting. It's about should significantly increase its exploration and or development of the Arctic.
oh, that is
So,
interesting.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting stuff. So
That's a really good topic. And and I mean one that could be polarizing, I suppose. But I mean, yeah, could be. But very interesting and outside, I think, of the usual things that, people are talking about politically. So
yeah. And that's the thing is, like, the debates, I mean, there are political stuff, but I mean, there's everything from intellectual property rights to talking about fiscal redistribution in the US, NATO, water resources. I mean, the just the amount of topics that the kids have to research, and I think it goes beyond just what's hot in the news right now, but really gets them to think about stuff. So
well, and sometimes you can have a great topic that isn't going to be hot in the news, and then all of a sudden it's hot in the news.
yeah.
I distinctly remember Public Forum had a NATO topic a few years ago, and about halfway through that topic, Ukraine got invaded by Russia.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Or like there was a topic. This Sam, when did I run rare earth minerals? Was that my senior year of high school?
I believe so, yeah. It had to do with like China extracting rare earth minerals.
Yeah. So my senior year of high school, I can't even remember what the topic was, but my case about it was about how China has this monopoly on rare earth minerals and how that's something that needs to get addressed. And all of my judges, I remember all of these ballots, like, oh, this isn't a problem. Like this like really isn't, you're making mountains out of molehills. And then today, rare earth minerals and China having all of these rare earth minerals is a massive topic. And I wanted to send all of those judges an email saying, I was right, you were wrong. But I didn't. I restrained myself from doing so.
Right on. All right. Well,
Mhm.
gentlemen, thank you very much for joining. I learned a lot about high school debate, and I hopefully our listeners did too. And I'd love to have you guys on in future to talk a little bit more about this subject.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
thanks for having us. It was fun.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Absolutely would love to be back on.
Thanks. Thank you very much.